Well, welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's a beautiful Friday, great Friday. Excited to talk about what's been happening this week. There's been lots going on. Of course, lots of drama has transpired that we dealt with in the earlier part of the week. It kind of got depressing. I issued my second, my morning episode today being like, all right, what's happening here, and what are they trying to distract you from? That's what the focus should be. And well, then we had Fitch Rating issue a report saying, yeah, if this continues, Canada is at risk potentially of being downgraded from their AAA credit rating, which has been espoused so much over the past couple of years, to assure Canadians it is all good. It is all good. And with me right now is former MP Rick Perkins, who's sitting across from me. Man, we're excited to have you. How are you feeling, sir?
Great to be here, Josh. Thanks for inviting me.
Dude, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for so much for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to be here. It's been a real wild time. How's what are you up to these days?
Well, this week my ear is getting sore from being on the phone so much, given everything that's going on. You know, you start out the week planning to look at the budget and see what's going on, and events sort of overtake that. So,
of course,
yeah, it's been a little crazy.
Absolutely, I don't blame you for it at all. What's obviously that's not what you want to talk about, but at the same time, you put out a lot of X posts about it. Yeah. Like you really want to make sure you got yourself in the mix a little bit. What was kind of the thought process there? Did you just want to clear the air, or kind of what was your thinking?
Well, you know, in politics, it's not like a team sport. It is a team sport. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we saw recently with the Blue Jays, right, that there's talent, there's teamwork, but really having a close-knit group of folks can make you even more powerful, more successful as a group. And these guys in the Blue Jays clearly have a chemistry that few teams had. And then their professional baseball experience was probably they said was unusual, right? Mm-hmm. And that contributed to their success. It's the same in politics. Like, you're on a team sport. This is a team sport. You join a party because you have certain beliefs and you fight for those beliefs, and you're on a team where you're doing that, and the other guy's doing some things that you think aren't helpful, and so you're at them. And when you're in those battles, and I've been in those battles as a volunteer for more decades than I care to count, but in the last 20 years here in Nova Scotia, with my, I guess, former friend Chris D'Entremont, maybe that'll be a friendship again someday. But I'm a believer that you get elected under a banner. Yeah, when you've been elected a long time, well, Chris has been elected a long time, 18 years provincially, 6 years federally, 24 years. There is no doubt in my mind that there are people in Acadie, Annapolis, in his federal riding, that vote for him because of his work over 26 years. I would hope so, right? Mm-hmm. And that he's built up some loyalty for that. But people also vote primarily in federal elections and also in provincial elections. They get driven by the party banner, by the leader's view, the view on the leader, for the most part. And when Chris made his surprise and somewhat unorganized, in my mind, announcement 2 minutes before the budget, it was a shock and a hit to all the people that he had only moments before been fighting this government on, whether it was the big economic issues that you talk about, or whether it's the most critical issue in our province when it comes to our number one industry, the fishery, and Chris is riding my riding, which, thousands and thousands of commercial fishermen, in which this government is doing all they can to harm that industry over the years. And to all of a sudden become and say, well, now I'm one of them, it gets an emotional response. For sure. And Chris and I have been having a lot of chats over the summer, but in particular the last couple of weeks when the rumors were circulating, which he denied and denied and denied, even including on the weekend. But people think these things are well organized. And if you ever work in actual government or work for a large business, they're actually not really good at organizational stuff. Occasionally things go wrong. And I believe that this got a little out of control for Chris in his media interviews. Mm-hmm. No government would announce a floor crossing 2 minutes before their budget. They just wouldn't. Yeah. Because it became all about now the floor crossing and about whether they had the numbers of the votes, rather than the messages they were trying to put out in the budget. Now, in the budget, we don't like it, obviously, but they do, or they wouldn't be delivering it. And they believe in this. They did this big build-up to it. And all of that got blown out the door by this whole debate about floor crossers and whether they have the votes to pass it and not the message. And they've been unable to get their budget message out. And I don't think that was intentional.
Really? So I think it was.
Yeah, I know.
And so the reason why is just because that's kind of how Mark Carney's played. That's just kind of what they've been doing. And I don't think they know, you have to know how bad that budget is. Like, I don't think they're as stupid as we think they are. And that's what was concerning to me.
No, it's not clever.
Yeah.
So what happens in the House on a budget day is question period's over and then the House goes into suspension. So all you see on TV is that green screen until 4 o'clock Ottawa time, 5 here when the budget starts. So the MPs hang around and they mill around in the House. And Chris was milling around in the House with all the other MPs and he was sitting in his seat on our side.
Yeah.
And then people's phones started buzzing about 15 minutes before the budget. And I talked to a number of our MPs and they're looking at this and Mark Gerritsen, the Liberal whip who talks too much.
Yeah.
They may think I talk too much, but he brings up his phone, he looks at it and he immediately runs across and sits beside Chris. Like, okay, what's going on, right? I got to get this guy. And then Chris quickly gets pulled out of the chamber by our folks and into the whip's office for a discussion about what's going on.
Yeah.
And he had a media interview that morning that I think didn't go quite as planned. Doesn't mean that he wouldn't have maybe gone across the floor anyway, because he had some issues all summer. But it doesn't mean it was planned. No government, and I've done business and government marketing communications for years, would ever scoop themselves on their budget. They actually believe their budget messaging. We look at all the things that we think are wrong, the $78 billion biggest deficit in the history of this country outside of COVID, and the fact that it actually doesn't seem to really do much. They look at it obviously differently or they wouldn't have presented it. They look at it as an important, investment, creating more bureaucracy and attempts to get things done. There's not much evidence, though, that I can see. And you saw that from the commentary on the budget, right? Yeah. Like, they satisfied nobody on the budget. Like, I don't know anyone except the Liberal MPs who thought it was a good budget. Yeah. Not even the CBC panelists thought it was. They said, what was this about? Like, it's a lot of money, but there doesn't appear to be a goal.
Yeah. Well, I think I take your point of the fact, like, the way it actually happened, I don't think that was planned. But I do think something happening near the end of this week was a part of the plan, because I think they really wanted this covered up because of how bad this budget is. And as you said, no one's agreeing with it. They had to have known that was going to happen. You don't think so?
No, I've been there. I was a staffer. I was a staffer in the Mulroney government when we were presenting budgets. And it's like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You probably saw the pictures on social media. The big party afterwards. Well, that wasn't a party because Chris D'Entremont joined the Liberals with champagne. That was a party to celebrate their fantastic budget that they had worked so hard on. That's what you believe. You're a true believer in that stuff. Like these guys, I know it's hard to believe that a bunch of MPs who said for 10 years that this was the right way to go are now excited about a budget that basically reverses chunks of what they did for 10 years in some ways. I don't believe they've reversed on the environment. Yeah, okay, they didn't plant a tree of the 2 billion trees, so they canceled a program that wasn't working. But they still have things in the budget that says, well, we're going to look at getting rid of the emissions cap on oil and gas, and we're going to replace it with another regulatory system that is a version of an emissions cap. Okay. It's like,
right.
So you haven't quite given up on your values green agenda, it looks like, when you look at the budget. So I think they had a lot of messaging in there aimed at Trump, the U.S., all of that stuff that's gotten overshadowed because nobody's talking about it, right? Yeah. And people want, when you present a budget, you want people saying, yes, this is great stuff. I mean, I know they wanted to go to an election campaign on this budget. Well, they wanted the House to fall.
That's what I'm saying, is the budget
stinks. They wanted the House to fall. No, they wanted the House to fall because they need a majority, and they were only 3 seats away. Absolutely. Right? And so I have my own little theory about one element of it, right?
Yeah.
Up until a couple of weeks ago, everybody assumed that the NDP were going to do what the NDP does, blah, 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 cave, vote with the Liberals.
Yeah.
And it was becoming clear in the last week or two that wasn't so certain, that the seven dwarfs, as I call them, the seven NDP members aren't really a cohesive group. They got their own issues about leadership and all of that. And I think they were sensing in their discussions, because the Prime Minister met with the leaders, that it wasn't a slam dunk. And so I believe they were saying, okay, well, we'll go to a budget on this, because between now and the spring, and you've had some quotes on your show from Tiff Macklin and stuff. Tiff Macklin's stuff was quite interesting, because he basically said, we're in a recession, and I don't foresee any growth in the economy as far as I can see. He said 0 to 1% a year for the next few years. Well, that's no growth. Yeah. That's not a robust economy. That's not the fastest growing G7 economy in the world. It's the worst G7 country in the world. The only one who's got flat GDP growth, according to the governor of the Bank of Canada. Not according to me or Pierre Poilievre, but according to the governor of the Bank of Canada. So things are going to get economically worse. We know that between now and the spring, or now and next fall.
Yeah.
And if you're a Liberal, is there a better time to go now? Carney's still in a bit of a honeymoon, right?
Yeah, definitely.
People cut him a break. Well, who could get a deal with Donald Trump? Well, he couldn't get a deal. He promised he would get a deal. Well, who could? Is what people say back, right? Who could get a deal? We don't fault him for not getting a deal that he promised he could get, because nobody could get a deal with him. So he's in that phase still. I don't think he'll be in that phase next year. So once the shine is off, things are going to get worse. More tariffs, more disruption, weak economy, more industries under attack. So what better time to go to an election than now on our transformational, generational budget that spends record amounts of money to try and turn our economy around and decouple it from the United States? No, I haven't read the Liberal speaking notes. They don't send them to me, but that's their story. Right?
No, definitely. And I think that's why I think.
So what did they do for the NDP? They put a 40,000 public sector layoff, when the NDP had been saying, don't lay anybody off or we'll vote against it.
Yeah.
Now they're challenging them.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think those are the kind of the poison pills I think were put in there for that reason specifically. I want to jump to the story that we kind of started off with, just to kind of get people up to speed here. This was coming from Fitch Ratings, which is the company that assesses creditworthiness of an entity or specific debt security. So this is important. This is a big issue. And so we'll read this off. It says, persistent fiscal expansion underscores Canada rating pressures. Fitch Ratings proposed budget announced, or Canada's proposed budget announced in Parliament on November 4th underscores the erosion of the federal government's finances, says Fitch Ratings. While Canada's rating is broadly stable, persistent fiscal expansion and a rising debt burden have weakened its credit profile and could increase rating pressure over the medium term. This may be exacerbated by persistent economic underperformance caused by tariff risks and structural challenges, included low productivity. And I really think back to what we've been seeing in the Parliament for the past couple of years. We're like, we got the AAA credit rating. And I've talked to people in the industry. I've talked about what's been happening. I asked, is it possible? Could it happen? Canada actually loses that AAA credit rating?
100%. Provinces have.
And they said so, yes.
Yeah. Provinces have. Other governments around the world have, if you get too indebted. And the other part of that story is, why are they looking at that as a worry? Because for 10 years, the Liberals have set fiscal guardrails, as they called them.
Yep.
Right? We're just going to have little small deficits for 3 years of $10 billion between 2015 and 2019. And by 2019, we'll be back in balance. Well, they blew past that, as we know. And then they used COVID as an excuse, but over 50% of the COVID spending wasn't related to COVID, except, according to the Auditor General, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer. So Chrystia Freeland would set these new guardrails, well, a percentage of GDP, and it would be this, or it would be that. And every year they missed it. And when they miss it, the next year's budget, they come up with a new definition. So now what we've got is a budget that proposes the largest non-war, non-pandemic deficit in the history with no sign of a balanced budget, right? Adding monstrous amounts to our national debt. So much so that we hear about the debt ceiling in the U.S. and the fact that they get these shutdowns.
Yeah.
We have a debt ceiling too.
Mm-hmm.
And this budget proposes raising the debt ceiling to $2.5 trillion.
Which,
right?
for anyone watching at home, is not sustainable for a country our size.
No. So, their own forecasts show that the deficit would be $78 billion, which, by the way, they've never met one of those targets. They've always blown past a budgetary target and what their annual deficit is. So it'll be $78 billion. So we can expect that it'll actually be higher.
Definitely. Because
they put not a nickel in here for Carney's commitment to go to 5% of GDP on defense. Mm-hmm. And so we know that'll be higher. And it adds that, a slightly declining one, to 5 years out, still having a $56 billion deficit. Remember, last year was $42 billion. This past year, and Trudeau wanted to raise it to $60 billion, and Chrystia Freeland used that as a reason to resign in December.
Yeah,
that $60 billion was even too much for Chrystia Freeland. It's unbelievable that Chrystia Freeland actually looks like she is a penny pincher compared to Mark Carney at $78 billion, and then still having it at over $50 billion 5 years from now. And that, Josh, only is if each budget in the next 5 years doesn't spend a nickel more of money, but the Liberals don't add another social program, and in that 5 years, put not a nickel to meet that commitment of 5% of GDP on that. That, just to give you an idea what 5% of GDP is, if we were doing that now, that would be $80 billion more a year of spending on defense.
Right.
$80 billion. Take that $78 billion, add another $80 billion, and that's what 5% of GDP on defense is, a deficit of $150 billion a year. So I don't think it's likely. So when Fitch looks at that and says, They don't meet their targets. They don't follow their guardrails. They've pledged to go even higher on defense. They're going to bring in more programs because they said they are. They'll bring in more tax breaks. They'll bring in all kinds of stuff, tax breaks for business to try and incent certain things. They'll do all of these things and spend more, and they look at it and say, it ain't sustainable. So you know what? We'll downgrade them. So what does that mean on $1.3 trillion of debt already? Well, that's at least a 1% increase in the cost of borrowing on short and long-term bonds. Mm-hmm. And we're out there in the bond market now competing with the U.S., which is growing their debt under Trump. And the stablecoin issues in the U.S. are eating up all the treasury bonds as well, which is compounding the demand and limiting the access to these things. So we've got a big problem because our debt servicing costs are going to go up. And if that downgrade goes up, you're going to see, right now we already spend more on interest on the debt than we spend on healthcare or national defense. Yeah. So you add that kind of increase on interest on 1.3 trillion, which is going to, over 5 years, we're talking about $1.7 trillion plus of debt and a 1% increase in the cost of borrowing for that.
Well, if anyone wants any eye-watering numbers, you said 5 years from now, if everything goes well, we get down to $56 billion in deficit spending, right?
If you believe any of this.
If you can pray that actually happens. To put in context, the first year of Trudeau's deficit run was $5.6 billion.
Right.
That's rough.
Eye-watering.
That's rough. And that's what I think is the most concerning of what we're currently watching. And the fact that I think the only thing that was missing from Mark Carney's platform is when he was kind of proposing this budget, saying this is what we're going to do, this is what's going to happen. I think the only line he was missing was the budget will balance itself.
Right. but I'll go back just a little further.
Yeah.
If I go back to 2015, Stephen Harper left a balanced budget, actually a surplus budget of about $1.5 billion in 2015. Mm-hmm. That was the last year of Stephen Harper's government. So
and that's the government trying to get through 2008, by the way.
So they managed to they had to run deficits in the global recession, and they got that to a balanced budget in 2014, 2015. Government spending then and I'm going a bit from memory, but I think was about $280 billion.
Wow.
Right? So we're talking revenue numbers this year in excess of $600 billion in only 10 years. Like more than doubling the cost of government, more than doubling the national debt, more than doubling all of these issues. And we know the issues Pierre talks about, food banks and all of those things that are going on. We talk about it. They talk about it in Parliament, 2.2 million people in Canada using food banks every year. Record numbers, right? Why are people using food banks who work? They never used to.
Yeah.
It's because everything's become so expensive. Every time the government spends excessive money like this, it goes into the system, which drives the price of everything up. So the more the government spends, the more expensive everything becomes.
For sure. And I do definitely want to make sure people know this about yourself. You have experience working on Bay Street, which is Canada's version of Wall Street. So you know your numbers, you know this stuff very well. Walk me through the scenario from what you know from your perspective and experience. If, for example, Canada loses that AAA credit rating, what happens on the ground here? What looks different, if anything?
Well, if the Liberals are in power, it just means bigger deficits. They'll just borrow more money, which is that vicious cycle when you're getting a credit card to pay off a credit card type of thing, which is sort of what we're doing. And that means eventually the more this happens, eventually some government's going to have to make some really drastic changes. We need drastic changes now, but every year this goes on is worse. Carney says over the next 5 years, he's cutting $60 billion of programs. But remember, they've taken government spending from about $200 billion to $600 billion. And they're cutting over 5 years, $60 billion, $10 billion a year, 10, 15% of this massive growth in the government. But then they're replacing it with faster spending.
Yeah.
Right? Spend less to spend more is what his slogan is. He calls it spend less, invest more, but it's spend less to spend more. Right? I'm going to make some cuts here. It's like you saying, well, you know what? I know we're having trouble paying our bills, so we're gonna stop going to a restaurant once a week, but we'll go eat at McDonald's every night of the week.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm gonna spend less in restaurants, but I'll spend more bringing the family over 7 days out to eat rather than what's going on and making the tough choices. And the tough choices are when you have a government that high, there's lots of room to make cuts. There's lots of room to get rid of things. The bureaucracy grew by 111,000 people under the Liberals. That's a 40% increase. There's more people working in national revenue than there are in national defense. That's crazy.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's actually crazy.
And then the Auditor General just came out with a report that said 40% when they did his audit, they basically phoned up like they were customers. 40% of the answers that largest government department that exists, 40% of the answers they gave were wrong. So having that kind of growth hasn't resulted in better service.
Imagine that, right? I do I'm going to throw what we saw from Andrew Scheer this afternoon. And I think he's, again, helping refocus a lot of people at this point in time where we've been seeing a lot of issues with people talking about the floor crossers or people who are now going to be, leaving their post and moving on. And there's a lot of scrutiny on this. And Andrew Scheer really did his job today to try and refocus the public on what the actual issue is.
I haven't seen this.
And this is just from this afternoon.
I can guarantee you, okay, you stop 100 people in any main street in this country. They are uninterested in palace intrigue. They are uninterested in parliamentary press gallery reporting on Liberal-sourced rumors. They are interested in facts that will affect their life. And the facts of this budget are their costs are going to go up. Inflation is already on the rise. Food inflation is already way over budget. There are alarm bells being sounded by everybody from the parliamentary budget officer to the Bank of Canada governor to credit rating agencies saying that the path that Mark Carney has put us on is unsustainable. That's what Conservatives are focused on. We are going to hold this government to account. We're going to fight to bring down prices, and we're not going to let Liberal sources put out rumors to distract from a terrible budget that Canadians are giving a giant thumbs down to. Thank you very much.
And so what I find...
I can guarantee you, guarantee you.
Okay, I can listen to Andrew again.
Yeah, let's do it again. What I find very interesting about this is the fact that, hey, let's get people focused on that the issue is this is an insane amount of spending. It's not sustainable. The issue I'm starting to see with people on the ground is, yes, there's obviously a chunk of the population that gets it. Like, yeah, this is not good for us. But there's also like a huge swath that's like, well, maybe we could still have our cake and eat it too. Like, how do you convince these people that this is only going to lead to economic ruin and everything you like and everything you know right now is only going to get worse, and you actually may not have it in the future if this keeps up?
I think public opinion, I know public opinion changes. You know, I ran in 2019 and wasn't successful, and nobody cared about the deficit then. They were, okay, Trudeau's got these little modest deficits. What the heck? You know, we need to spend a little bit of money. We were actually in the economy, from about 2013 on was doing really well, right? And it hides a lot of sins, right? And lots of revenue was flowing into Ottawa because people were doing a lot better than they're doing now, right?
Doing so well that we sold off all our gold.
Right, absolutely. And and 2021 was every election is unique. 2021 was unique because we were sort of on the tail end, partially coming out of COVID. So it was a very different type of election.
Yeah.
Again, I think some of the reaction was very emotional in 2025 to what Donald Trump was doing and saying about Canada, and with his April 2nd Liberation Day and, 51st state and all of that stuff. And people reacted emotionally.
Yeah.
And they looked and said, well, there's a portion of voters that looked and said, I think Mark Carney will be fiscally responsible because after all, he was a banker. Well, he wasn't really a banker. He was a central banker. He didn't work for CIBC or Royal Bank. He wasn't a banker. He was a government bureaucrat working for a government organization called the Bank of Canada. That's not the same as being a banker. He wasn't making decisions on whether or not you should get a mortgage.
Yeah.
And
then transition to private equity after that.
Right. So he most of his career from his 30s on was working Department of Finance, Bank of Canada, Bank England, all government positions. But nonetheless, he's a well-educated man. And they looked at him and said, okay, those who were driven by the economic stuff, I think were sold a bill of goods that he would be a sort of blue liberal, as they used to call them, right? The John Manley, Paul Martin type of liberal who was concerned about fiscal restraint and, keeping government expenditures low and actually saying no at the cabinet table to the wishes of the various ministers. But it doesn't appear to be that way. I believe that he is, he knows how to read government accounts, but he doesn't seem to say how to say no. Like he's created a lot of new bureaucracies in the last 6 months, but then that's what people who spent their life working as a government bureaucrat do. They think the solution is more bureaucracy because I'm here from the government to help. Right? As Ronald Reagan used to say, that those were the scariest words in the English language.
Put that in an ad.
Right? Yeah. And so the solution to the housing crisis is to create yet another housing organization. Well, we already have a couple of those in Ottawa, the biggest one being CMHC. Yep. Why create another one? The solution to getting infrastructure built is not to get rid of the bad legislation of the Trudeau government that stopped capital from going into these projects. It's to create another bureaucracy whose job it is to pick which projects will be exempt from the bad laws and the ones that we don't like will still be subject to the bad laws, right? And so Greg Ebel, who's the CEO of Enbridge, was quite clear a few weeks ago. He said, look, even if you got rid of C-69, the pipeline bill, we're not building a pipeline. And we're not building a pipeline because the only place to take it is the BC. And if I can't get the oil from the pipeline to a boat to the markets where it needs to go, I'm not going to spend the money. Yeah. So you got to get rid of the tanker ban, which then allows us, if we get rid of C-69, the no capital bill, that prevents pipelines from being built. Now we have a business plan that says capital will come here, we'll build the pipelines, and we are a resource economy. Like, I don't know if I said this before when I was on, but, you know, in business, right? In business, you are successful if you have a competitive advantage over the other companies you're competing with.
Yeah.
And you work hard to protect that, to grow that, to evolve it, to keep current, or you die.
Mm-hmm.
Government's no different. Canada's no different as a country. We have a competitive advantage over the world.
Yeah.
And that competitive advantage is our natural resources. We have everything that the world needs to build things, to thrive. But we have put in place the last 10 years, the Liberals have put in place legislation to stop us from doing that. Legislation to stop us from mining. Legislation to stop us from extracting oil and gas. We've had a war on the resource industries by the Liberal government, and we have a Liberal Prime Minister now who believes in those things. He has not fixed the Band-Aid. It's like, you know, it's like you get diagnosed with cancer and, you know, you need surgery, you need radiation and chemo. Mm-hmm. And the government comes and says, yeah, it's a terrible thing. You got that cancer. Here's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And they're not dealing with the core problem. They're not going in and doing the surgery required to remove the tumor. Mm-hmm. And the tumor is the bills that the Liberals put in place that had stopped the capital flow and investment into Canada, which creates our jobs and wealth. And those are the I call it the no capital bill. Pierre calls it the no pipelines bill, but it actually stops mining. It stops pipelines. It stops anything. It stops LNG plants. Anything that needs an environmental review gets stopped by the Trudeau bill that Carney loves because he's left it in place. Yeah. So creating an office to say, Josh, maybe we'll take your project through this. Rick, you're out of luck. Sorry, your project's not. And he expects that capital is going to come to Canada and that everyone's going to beg him to be one of the ones that goes through. And I don't think that it's not working.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work.
Well,
get rid of the bills.
Yeah. Well, it kind of brings me back to the point too, where it's like, you know, he might like that bill because it allows him to dictate who gets that to contract. You know, think about that for one.
Yeah.
But then number two, we look about the Fitch ratings here, right? And I want to bring us back to that because that's a global credit firm. Like they assess credit of these different organizations, entities. That's Mark Carney's world. What do you think happens here? How do Liberals bounce back from that? And how do the Conservatives message in a way that is effective with people, that people realize like, whoa, Mark Carney came from this world and they're saying what he's doing is not going to work, or could, on the very, very small margin, it could work, but it's just not sustainable for our nation. Well,
what usually happens after a budget is the Minister of Finance goes and meets with the rating agencies to have one-on-one conversations to try and get through that, to make sure we keep that credit rating, right? So I imagine Minister Champagne's going to go and meet with all of them. Fitch is one, you know, Moody's, others, and try and convince them. But, how does he answer the fact that they've always blown by their deficit targets. They've always ignored their guardrails to control spending. And they always bring in a budget every year with colossally more spending than the one before. And it just keeps piling up. And he's going to say, well, I know I've been part of the government for 10 years, but it's different this time. It's really different. Trust me.
It's an investment.
It's an investment. Don't you understand? And by the way, I am the guy, Minister Champagne, that signed a $15 billion contract, EV contract with Volkswagen, and was another 15 with Stellantis, and never read it. Yeah. I mean, he admitted that to me in committee, that he didn't read it, the 26-page contract. So this is the fellow that's going to go there. This budget paper is 500 pages, and he didn't read a 26-page contract that he signed for a $15 billion subsidy to Volkswagen and another $15 billion to Stellantis. And how's that working out? Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So I don't have a lot of confidence that while he's an energetic fellow, and he's a charming fellow, believe me, he is a charming fellow, he knows everything about a quarter of an inch deep. And I'm not sure if he sits in the rooms with the New York and the Toronto bond rating, credit rating agencies. I sure hope he brings some smart people from the Department of Finance and the bureaucracy to answer the questions, because I don't believe he's going to be able to defend why this is different from the other 10 years.
Could it potentially have a similar result to when every time Carney was meeting with another country, we got tariffs thrown on us? So it could be something similar to that. Like, actually, today's the day you're going to lose your AAA credit rating.
Well, elbows up, right? I'm going to be tough on Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
But apparently, according to Mr. Carney, he's a transformative leader who he has a texting, I won't say sexting, but he has a texting relationship with at the wee hours of the morning, who
You're a bad man, Rick.
now apologizes for things that other people do, humiliating our country. Mm-hmm. I found that one of the most humiliating things is that he apologized to Donald Trump when he's the guy who said, I'm going to be tough on him. Did he ask for Donald Trump to apologize for the 51st state? Right. Or did he just roll over and say, oh, you're upset with the Ronald Reagan ad, so I apologize what Doug Ford did? Mm-hmm. Like, who is he to apologize for Doug Ford? Like, he's not Doug Ford's father. Like, it's not the dad apologizing to a parent for something his kid did.
I don't know, Rick, man. When you saw them go on that latte date, I thought he was his daddy at that point.
Well, yeah, they had that fireside chat at Doug's cottage,
right.
But it's just insane to me to think that this guy, what has that gotten us, right? What has it gotten us? More tariffs, no deals, goes down for lunch to the White House, doesn't get a reduction in aluminum tariffs or solve the auto industry issues where he wants to destroy our auto industry. Doug Ford does the stuff. Then he apologizes to him. Did that get negotiations going again? No, they won't even talk to us now. Every time Carney seems to do something with Donald Trump, in spite of the fact that they text each other and seem to like each other, we end up in worse shape. I think Canadians should ask Mark Carney to stop texting the president so our economy doesn't end up in worse shape.
Fair enough. I will have to ask you the question though, because okay, I actually agree with your point. Like, if you're going to run a whole campaign saying you're going to be a tough guy and you're not a tough guy, well, that's really annoying. But what if he did run a campaign saying he's going to be diplomatic with Donald Trump? Would you be as frustrated with how he's been dealing with it in terms of even apologizing for the Reagan ad?
Look, there's lots of theories on what to do, right? Almost every country in the world has signed a deal with Donald Trump except for us.
Right.
Even China, Trump came out of China a bit with this.
As well as Mexico as well.
Yeah, and so you're sitting there and you're saying, so what are the other options? If I ran the campaign, let me ask you, if I ran a campaign saying the way to do this is through traditional negotiation and diplomacy, and Donald Trump has his politics to deal with, and that's that, but we'll just have a respectful relationship and adults will sit around the table and it'll all be fine. Do you think Mark Carney would have got elected?
Oh, heck no. No, that was their only play.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because they were worried that they were going to be fourth place party. Yeah. Right. They were trying to crawl back. Mm-hmm. And the emotion of what all that became was a big factor in what happened in the results. So he played into it, leaned into it. Very political thing to do, he did. Mm-hmm. He said a lot of bad things about the United States and about Trump. And he said that and he still says our relationship is over. Like, his latest stuff is, well, we'll double in the next 10 years our trade with the rest of the world, right? Yeah. That's $400 billion, ultimately. Losing 30% of our trade with the United States is $1.3 trillion right now. So you're sitting there saying, wait a minute here. It is conceivable with auto and all these things that are happening that we could lose 30% of our trade with the United States. It can't be replaced with trade with the rest of the world. If I make a cell phone, if I make a cell phone here in Canada, we don't, but let's say I did, I got to put it on a truck or a train to transport it. Is it cheaper to transport it to the U.S., the largest market in the world, to sell my product into the market, or to put it on a ship and put it over to Australia or to Europe? Well, obviously, the shorter your transportation, the lower your costs, and the more competitive your products and pricing will be in that market. Yeah. There isn't a country in the world that wouldn't trade places with us to be next to the United States, to be able to trade with them on a cost-effective basis.
Yeah.
And the only reason that he says we have the lowest tariffs of the world, Prime Minister Carney, is because of Brian Mulroney.
Yeah.
Because Brian Mulroney brought in the FTA and then NAFTA. It isn't because of CUSMA. The Liberals like to came. They tried to argue under Trudeau was to put some woke stuff into CUSMA about gender analysis and all of this stuff, and ended up getting snowed on a few things like digital sovereignty and other things that the Americans put in. So it put us in a bad spot. So there really was very little of any positive things that were done in CUSMA. So the reason we get most of our stuff to the U.S. tariff-free right now is because of Brian Mulroney's NAFTA, not because of anything this government did. And so the greatest danger is that we lose that.
Yeah.
Because of the way Carney's mismanaging things.
Yeah, and I do agree with that. And I'm curious where we go from here at this point, because as you said, there's still that honeymoon period. There's still that little like, oh, no one's really getting much done with Trump. Like, look what Mexico's not even getting a deal. However, they're now dealing with Mexico separately from us at this point because of how tenuous we've made that relationship and the lack of diplomacy at this point. And so I guess that brings me to the point of the fact that we've seen everything kind of go wrong, but for whatever reason, people are still kind of willing to, turn the blind eye to all of it. And then obviously with everything that exploded this week with the Conservative Party, and all of a sudden all the talk became about the party that's not in power, about the guy who's not the prime minister and all of that. But I really did find it interesting, your conversation with Northern Perspective, where you talked about when it looked like the Conservatives were going to win and all the talk that was happening on Parliament Hill. Mm-hmm. And people whispering in, wondering if they could maybe cross the aisle. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if you're able to know, or if you did know, do you roughly know how many people were looking at that time?
I personally know of at least 3 Liberals.
Oh, wow. That's a number.
And that's just from my conversations.
Yeah.
And they were approaching us. We didn't do what Carney was doing.
Yeah.
Under Pierre. Now, there have been Conservative leaders. Andrew Scheer took Leona Alsaf, a former military member who crossed the floor from the Liberals to our party. So, people say, well, you guys took the floor crossers, and that's true in the past. Each leader can approach these things differently. And frankly, I never had a discussion with Pierre about floor crossers, but I know in talking with the powers that be, in addition to what I knew, because I raised some names with them, they said, no, we're not taking floor crossers, So now you could say that was part of, we're riding high in the polls and we don't need them. But I think there was more to it. There was a more philosophical thing going on with our folks that don't like the idea of floor crossers. Now, every leader is different. So over the years, one of the things that I've learned is what the most important thing to an MP is?
What?
Keeping their job.
Yeah.
Not much different than regular people.
Just like anybody else.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're sitting there, and the Liberals, you're dead men walking. The Conservatives are at 45%. You're at 20. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like you'll even be official opposition. You want to keep your seat.
Yeah.
You're a Liberal, which means you don't really have any philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. You just have a thirst for power. Mm-hmm. So, hey, Rick, we're kind of friends. What do you think? But there were more formal approaches than that.
Yeah.
And I would raise the names that approached me, and I was told, no, sorry, we're not interested in floor crossers.
Yeah.
So, so that was there. Mm-hmm. Now the Liberals are feeling pretty cocky in the House. They were going to be fourth party in their government, and so they're really good at stoking the mainstream media who they own with their sources. PMO sources tell me that Josh was talking to them about maybe crossing the floor. Yeah. Ottawa's a small town.
It sure is.
Everybody, you know who you are. You run into people walking on Spark Street. I'd run into Liberal staffers, and they stop and chat. And so, I just talked to the industry critic, Rick Perkins. This is what he told me, blah, blah, blah. Or this is, no, he's kind of, things aren't happy in the Tory caucus. So the Liberals go and, multiply it by 10 and say, oh, man, Althea, we got you on payroll. Look at this.
Yeah.
So This is the craziness of the Ottawa bubble. And as Andrew said, nobody cares. Like, outside of some people in Nova Scotia who had heard of Chris D'Entremont, quite frankly, I mean, maybe some people had heard of me because I'm a bit of a big mouth and was in Parliament. But Chris was a quiet fellow in the chair. Other than seeing this guy up in the chair, they had no idea who he was if they were watching the House. People don't really pay attention to the speaker that much. Name me the name of the speaker, current speaker, you know?
Yeah, I actually still don't know his name. I know Craig Perkins a lot better.
Yeah, well, because he was a partisan.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, go on.
So, you know, how many people across, even after a floor crossing, know Chris's name? Nothing against Chris. Nothing. It's just that people have lives. And the micro stuff that Andrew was answering, that the media obsessed with in Ottawa, and politicians obsessed with in Ottawa, and staffers obsessed with in Ottawa, and lobbyists obsessed in Ottawa, and the bureaucracy obsessed in Ottawa, almost nobody else cares about.
Yeah.
Who and who said who, and who might be having lunch with who, and who had dinner with who, and who's walking across the what's a floor crosser, like.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of a band that I grew up on, Bowling for Soup, and they have a song called "High School Never Ends."
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it hits me with.
Oh yeah, like people would ask me what was it like after I got elected, and I said, well, you know, it's like high school, right?
Yeah.
You got the cool kids, you got the nerds, you got the jocks, you got the this, you got the that. It's just like high school. You've got all these little groups.
Yeah,
right.
That's kind of what hits me too, because you know I've been a handful of times to Ottawa as well, and like as the show has grown over time and been talking to different people, if I'm in a coffee shop, I genuinely find myself looking over my shoulder every time I'm in Ottawa. I'm like, who's listening? Who's walking? Because everyone's listening, man. All the walls have ears out there. It's really wild.
The walls have ears. Standing in a coffee shop have ears. When last year I flew 126 times, standing in line for your flight, you wouldn't believe what you hear people saying.
Right.
I've stood behind pollsters that I know personally who didn't realize I was standing behind them, listening to what they were saying about our party as a neutral pollster.
Of course. Yeah.
And I won't name them.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll call them afterwards and tell them, hey, do you remember when I was behind you? You didn't know I was behind you. So this happens, and things happen. You're sitting in the airport lounge. I'm on the plane back and forth doing this stuff when I was doing it with Sean Fraser, with Cody, all these guys from Nova Scotia. You're on a plane every 2 times a week with them. You got the same schedule, right? You're sitting in the same airport lounge. I sit there talking to Chris D'Entremont about what's going on and blah, 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 and caucus, and they can hear you if you're not careful, and vice versa, right?
Exactly.
So you got to be really careful. It's part of sort of the ABC training they do when you get first elected. It's like, shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
And this is why I would not do well in politics, folks.
Shut up outside a caucus.
Yeah.
Don't be talking about what our strategy is. Don't be talking about what people are doing, and don't be talking about who's grumpy and who's not, right? Because the lines have ears.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally understand that. And I do appreciate that point about how like no one outside of Ottawa cares about this stuff.
No.
Like, sure, it's maybe fun for 24 hours, but then everyone's like, yeah, I still can't feed my kids.
I like you're live here, right?
Yeah.
So how many people that are watching knew the name Chris D'Entremont before this week?
Oh, it's we can put a poll out actually for that. That'll be fun. Who knew?
Trump needs to kick Canada the Five Eyes. They basically have. They don't share intelligence data with us now. They don't trust our government and its leaks.
Yeah, let's just start with that. We'll see how that goes. That'll be a fun one. Trump, yeah, fair play. I didn't even realize we were getting super chats. Rip. But we'll let that play out. We'll see how that one goes. But in terms of
nothing against Chris.
Yeah,
like Chris worked hard over the years. He's a very affable and likable guy, and he was a good friend of mine. And it's a real loss not to have him as a friend anymore, because you fight the battles together. I just wish he would have talked to some of us about it before he did it.
Yeah, it's definitely an unfortunate situation. And I don't know, did you see what Aaron Gunn pulled in committee the next morning?
I saw him. I saw him because I reposted his questions to the fisherman from Newfoundland, quoting Chris.
Yeah, what a wild move, eh?
Chris was there, right? Because Chris is sitting
across the table,
sitting right across the table.
Yeah, and so
I love how he called him Liberal MP. Chris D'Entremont said this about the Liberals.
Yeah, yeah, and like it was. I would have loved to have had a camera on Chris at that point in time, but it was that moment of like really trying to push the point home of like, yeah, like what happened? What changed within this amount of time? Did you believe this? Did you not believe that? But again, back to your point, no one actually terribly cares about the drama that happens in Ottawa, except for maybe at this point.
But, I hate hypocrisy. That's kind of, but, I'm sitting there. I announced our first time a platform in recent memory has had a national commercial fisheries policy was ours. The Liberals, nobody else had one. I announced it here in Nova Scotia. Chris was there. Chris did the French part of it.
Yeah.
And of course, a big part of that was saying how the Liberals had intentionally, for a whole bunch of reasons, messed up this important industry in our riding. And there's Chris standing there saying it. And now he's joined the guys that he were. So that's what Aaron was going at, saying, you said this, you said this, you said this. Now, which is it? Yeah. Either these guys are good or they're bad. If they're bad, why did you join them? I saw somebody ask me what I thought about Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we'll actually, let's pull this up here. Come on, there it is. So 67% of people right now haven't heard of Chris.
I'm impressed that 33%. That must be Nova Scotians here.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of Nova Scotians, honestly, in the chat right now at this point in time.
My old friend Tyson Ross is probably putting, I knew him.
Yeah, it's all good. But it's... I think I'll end with this question, then we'll hit the super chats because I know that's like that gets Reg excited too when we're doing it. That's distracting at the moment. But,
I know I can't. I'm sort of addicted to looking at it.
Oh, no sweat. We'll cover it after here. But I will ask this question here. So, but say the budget passes. Say 6 to 8 months down the road, what happens?
The budget passing is actually not as simple as it looks like. There's a whole bunch of pieces to the budget. So when the budget was tabled this week, it's what was tabled with it. And I'll go through some arcane stuff, but there's what's called the Ways and Means motion. So what that motion is it basically gives Revenue Canada the instruction that what's written in this budget and tax changes you can start implementing, even though legislation hasn't been drafted and tabled and implemented on that. So that's what the vote will be on around the 18th to 20th. The first vote will be on the Ways and Means motion. Sometime in the next month or so, maybe, they will introduce something called the Budget Implementation Act. It actually is the legislative changes. The big omnibus bill now in these exercises, usually over 800 pages, would amend 50-some acts, and one of them, which I filibustered on in Finance Committee when Christopher Freeland went go, I filibustered for 18 hours. We'll make this podcast a little shorter.
Oh, man.
You can't repeat yourself. So for 18 hours until Christopher Freeland would agree to come, that omnibus bill even had amendments to the Royal Titles Act, changing the titles of some of the royals in it. That wasn't, so these are huge acts. So that comes, and that's what actually goes to committee, right? That's a 6-month process of where the budget bill is going through committee, may get amended in committee, have to come back to the House from report stage, have to go the third reading, then has to go to the Senate, through the whole legislative process. The Ways and Means motion is a more general philosophy. They're both confidence motions. So the budget has multiple confidence motions. We get asked about that all the time.
Yeah.
There'll be lots more opportunity. There'll be opportunity because we control committees with the bloc. We have more votes than the Liberals do with the bloc, that we can actually amend things in committee. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Just generally in politics, what happens? I wish I had a crystal ball. Who can predict what Donald Trump is, other than the fact that he's going to dominate our politics for quite a while until we have a trade deal. My own personal belief is that Donald Trump's going to cancel CUSMA. And he's going to say, you got 6 months now to renegotiate. He didn't like having to tinker with NAFTA the first time around, but now he has control of the Congress, so he can be more broader, and he'll cancel CUSMA. And I believe when he cancels CUSMA to start a 6-month negotiation on his terms for every industry, including the 12 or 13 irritants that the U.S. Trade Representative have from dairy on, softwood lumber, all these things. I believe Carney will call an election on that. And I think going forward, so we could have an election on any of these confidence votes anytime over the next 2 weeks to 6 months. We could have an election because Donald Trump wakes up one morning and cancels CUSMA, and away we go. We could have one because Mark Carney thinks the polling numbers are right for him, and he can get some extra seats to get his majority. There's lots of scenarios. So we're, in the absence of an agreement with the NDP, the average life expectancy of a minority government is 18 months, right? We're already 7 months into this minority government.
Yeah.
So the odds are that the government's not going to last in this another year, max.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm gathering as well. And I think that's I do find your point interesting about the fact that, okay, when the time of the renegotiation of CUSMA starts coming, or at least starting to bridge those conversations, and then Trump decides, nah, we're done. Do you think Carney would still have the confidence of Canadians to grow and hand those negotiations when he couldn't get a deal in the first place? Or do you think that could fire back?
I thought I was a good judge of that. I'm running in the last election, but I got it wrong. I didn't think they would have the confidence in him to do that and all the other things, because, let's face it right now, what Trump is doing is affecting very few Canadians. If you work in the auto industry, the steel, aluminum industry, softwood lumber industry, you're being affected what Trump does. But most people aren't working in those industries. And the things that they work in are CUSMA free, tariff free. Right. So it's more an emotional theory. And a lot of people don't actually react until it's actually saying, okay, your spouse, whatever, has lost their job because of what the U.S. has done. So it's a bit theoretical to a lot of folks. So I don't know where people are going on this, on their confidence of who can do it. I just know that the longer this goes, I believe, where we don't have a deal and the rest of the world does, the more some of our industries get tweaked by the U.S., the more difficult it's going to be for the Liberals. That's what my instinct tells me. Yeah. But, ultimately it's a choice for Canadians between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, and nobody's a perfect human being. I haven't met one yet. Yeah. And so everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses, and it's sort of magnified when you're a leader of our party or the Liberal Party. And I think, the shine's starting to wear off Mark Carney. How much quicker it will wear off, I don't know. It depends on a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, right? Yeah. It's been a while to go. We'll see what the chat's saying right now, because I know
still 67%, huh?
Yeah. All right. So there we go. We read that one. Yeah. So what do you make of Trump, Mr. Rick Perkins?
Well, I think that was it. Look, I hate a lot of the stuff he says.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Particularly about our country.
Right.
I find it insulting, humiliating, disrespectful. 51st state. I don't care who the prime minister is, calling them governor and stuff. It's pretty disrespectful. He may think it's funny in his own sense of humor, but he's not. But it's not. But he also is the president of the United States. He's not the prime minister of Canada. Yeah. So whoever that person is, whether it's him or God help us, Newsom or somebody like that afterwards, their first priority is to defend their country economically and from national security. So I'm not sure why people would think, other than his excessively aggressive nature and not very diplomatic nature, that what he owes to us. We fought, people died to defend them in Afghanistan. That's true. But he's got a duty to his economy and his people. We've got a duty to ours.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at his campaign, right? America first.
Yeah,
That's not Canada first, right?
He's a New York real estate guy, and he acts and sounds like New York real estate guys do. It's all about the deal.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Actually, a good follow-up to that question, too, is what do you think Trump will do if Carney aligns more with China?
Oh, that's a great question. Who asked that question?
That's from Granite Man 62.
Granite Man.
Yeah.
Granite Man. Great. That is the core of so many things, right? Like China is our enemy. The Chinese Communist Party. I worked hard to bring changes into the Investment Canada Act to make sure any attempts by China to buy assets and companies in Canada had to be reviewed.
Because they also had a heavy hand in the fisheries too, right?
They've been buying up fisheries and buying up all kinds of things. I won't go into the details of that act change if you want, but China has been engaged in an economic Cold War, but they also are a massive industrial machine. The world thought during the Bill Clinton days that if you brought China into the free trade nations and they played by trade rules, fair and square like everyone else, that commerce eventually would open up more democratic tendencies. Well, that was a big mistake. But we all bought into it. Everybody bought into it. It was a thing that Bill Clinton pushed when they put China in the WTO, and all the nations supported then. But what ended up happening, of course, is they don't play by the rules. They took all of our manufacturing jobs. They didn't go to Mexico. They went to China and Vietnam, which is a subset of China.
Yeah.
And they're busy trying to buy up political influence all over the world, whether it's their Belt Initiative in Africa and Latin America to control the infrastructure there. Their attempts to basically create a high-speed rail automated AI cargo system to run along the Panama Canal that they would own and control traffic. The stuff around Greenland was about access to the north. They have more polar class 1 icebreakers in China, and they're not an Arctic or Antarctic nation. They have more polar class 1 icebreakers than Canada and the U.S. combined. The U.S. has none. And these are the ones that can go through old, thick ice.
Yeah.
We're going to be building some soon, but
using Canadian steel.
Yeah, well, we'll see, because we don't make we don't make steel in Canada for ships.
No, we don't.
It's a different type of steel. So the China issue is a big issue, because I think a lot of what's behind a lot of the issues that the U.S. has with the security of the Western Hemisphere is about China. You have an alliance between, it's called CRINCS, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. They are an alliance. They've replaced the old Soviet Union. They are an alliance, and they are destabilizing democracies around the world. A lot of what's gone on in the Middle East has been funded through Russia and China. What went on in Lebanon, what went on in Gaza, what went on in Syria, these things were funded through that group. And North Korea is a big part of it. What's going on in Ukraine, you have, North Koreans being given to Russia as cannon fodder, and in exchange for that, Russia is giving nuclear technology to North Korea. So you have this going on in this destabilization, and China's the biggest player for money in that. And our folks are pretty naive in it, from political interference to actual acquisitions of our companies, which we allow to happen in Canada, to the dumping of Chinese steel, tires, and many other products come into Canada from China and make their way into the U.S. That is not being done because they like us.
Right.
That's being done because they want to control us. It's one of those things that Carney said about the U.S. Well, it's really China that's trying to control us and pretty much every other nation in the world. And you're ending up with a situation that says, okay, well, is Donald Trump pushing Mark Carney to China, or was his relationship with China and Brookfield already well established? The Liberal Party with Dominic Barton and everything that he had done as ambassador, and before that with McKinsey in China, and Brookfield is in China.
Yep.
And Mark Carney got a $260, I think it was, $1 million investment loan in Brookfield, the financing through China before he was elected. You know,
it's a globalist wet dream over there, man.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I believe that they'll say, well, we're being pushed that way, but I don't think we're being pushed that way. I think Mark Carney wants to go that way, and everybody listening, like, China is very dangerous for our country.
Yeah.
Watch out, because as the auto industry is facing its challenges, I'm waiting for Mark Carney to announce that he's done a deal that the Chinese car makers will be allowed to assemble vehicles here.
Yep.
And they'll get rid of the tariffs on canola and seafood.
Yep.
And the reality is, if that happens, there goes our auto business. We're assembling Chinese spy machines. They are hooked up to our power grid because you have to charge them, which means that they now have access to our power grid through vehicles. They have access to all your data as you plug your phone in and know everything you're doing and saying. And these cars will get into the U.S. And if these cars get into the U.S. through Canada, we will be in a war with the United States, because that will really be destructive to whatever they're trying to do on the U.S. auto business. And you may say, oh, good, good. You know, look what they're doing to us. But this is not a good way. Our friend is not communist China.
Yeah.
Our friend is democratic countries, Western democratic countries.
Yeah. And I do find that interesting in terms of, you know, the whole conversation around the WTO and bringing China in. It's interesting how China seems to have rubbed off more on the West, and the West has rubbed off on China over the
Funny
years.
how that works.
It's crazy how that works, isn't it? Yeah. And I think it kind of brings up, before it even gets to the point of us bringing potential factories from China over here to assemble cars, obviously, even as so much as an announcement like that happens, you know, Trump's acting. What do you think he does?
Oh, he'll put massive across-the-board tariffs on Canada.
Yeah.
Right? He'll shut down our auto industry tomorrow. He'll just say, no more cars from Canada.
Yeah.
Sorry, done. I mean, so, like, there is a massive reaction that would come because not only is it a threat to the North American auto business, and you can argue all the good reasons why maybe our auto business isn't producing the kind of cars they want. I'm not particularly a fan of EVs, but they may or may not be good cars. In my part of the world, in a rural Nova Scotia riding, there's no charging station, so they're useless.
Yeah.
So I think the bigger danger here is that it just destroys the access that we have, and it doesn't matter. Like that 30%, $1.3 trillion. Like, imagine what if that was 50% to our economy.
Yeah.
Because we did that. I'm not saying you should be afraid of Donald Trump, but China is not our friend. Cheap Chinese vehicles are not the solution to our economic challenges. Getting our oil and gas and our minerals to other parts of the world is the challenge.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
Preach it, Rick. Preach it. Talk about it. Talk about it. We'll try to get through these in a good expeditious fashion here. Holy jumping. People love to talk to you. Holy smokes. I heard of Chris before this week. Born in Halifax, live in Vancouver now. Thanks, Rick, for helping us understand things better. Hit the like button. Thank you, I Am Canuck. Really appreciate it. Marco Perusa says, Rick, what do you think about the Conservatives hosting something like a policy con to spotlight and dive deep into their key policies?
PolicyCon. Kind of funny, because I was just in downtown Halifax and Helicon's on now.
Right, that's
you
right.
should see everybody dressed up in their gear,
It's
man.
electric down there.
It's insane.
Now,
I couldn't find a parking spot because of Helicon. It's a huge thing here and across the country. So I don't expect costumes at PolicyCon, but we have a convention, and every convention is a policy convention that we have. It's in Calgary in the end of January. It's required under our Constitution that policy be part of it. I actually have a meeting with my association this weekend on the policies that other associations are proposing, and putting forward some of our own to see if we can get them on the policy agenda. I think we're doing that. I'll just tell you one other thing, though. What Pierre asked me to do, he announced it in June, is he said, look, we need to have, I'd like to have a Economic Advisory Council on Canada's productivity problems. So he announced that myself, as a co-chair with Greg McLean, who's our MP from Calgary Centre. He would be the chair. And Gaëtan Malade, who's one of our new MPs, who's a mining executive from Northern Ontario, we would be the co-chairs, and to put together a council of CEOs across this country, which is what I did most of the summer, was put together a council of about 40 CEOs from across the country.
You were working. That's good. We love to see it.
And I'm about to hit the road next week for 20 meetings across the country.
Wow.
With business leaders. So our council members will be there. CEOs, like the one in Halifax, we will have a meeting with about 15 CEOs to talk about the productivity challenges, to produce a report for Pierre that'll be made public in January, late January, before the convention. That's the goal, to start putting forward ideas about transformative policy changes to move our economy forward that aren't about just tinkering. They're not about a tax cut for soccer moms or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're beyond that now with our economic challenges. We need some major surgery, which the government doesn't seem to be willing to do. So we're going to be doing that. So we got two big policy things going up, the convention and then the economic stuff that I'm working on.
That's amazing.
And if you got any ideas,
let us know.
Mail it in here.
Yeah, hi@elevatepodcast.ca.
Mail it in here, and Josh will email it to me, and we'll put that into the mix.
Definitely, absolutely. Love to see it. Thank you, Rick. Look how hard Rick's working. He's not even an MP. Look at him go.
Working for free.
Let's go. Granite Man 62. He says you love Canada so much. That's why. We have here, again, it says, Carney makes military alliance with China. Rest in peace to Canada. Yes. Sasquatch Chronicles says, Canada is in breach of CUSMA. You took our booze off your shelves. You tariffed goods protected under CUSMA.
I didn't take the booze off.
that wasn't us.
That wasn't me.
That was our premiers.
I like my bourbon.
Yeah. Tear it up. Let's see those elbows. You are not a state. Let's embargo Canada and find it together. And Sasquatch is definitely an American.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Since he said our booze, right?
Yeah.
Look, the booze here is controlled by provincial governments. Some of them made that decision. I'm a free market guy. I'd rather let the consumers decide, and consumers are deciding. Like we didn't bar people from going to the U.S., but travel in Canadians has gone down significantly with the U.S. because people are pretty upset. Americans need to understand people are upset. If we called your president governor and started to go around saying we're going to annex your states, California, Washington State should join us because, we'd like some sunnier places and some better wine. And they'd have more fun here because we have better hockey teams. Mm-hmm. And we started to do all that stuff. I don't know. The Americans would probably think it's a joke, but it's an insulting thing, right? So Canadians are responding. You shouldn't think you can insult people and they're not going to respond. But I'm more a guy who says let Canadians decide what they want to buy and not do with Americans. I suspect if that wonderful American Kentucky bourbon and sour mash and the wonderful Chardonnays from California and the Pinots from Washington State and Oregon State were here, I suspect the sales would be pretty low.
Right. Yeah, well, it's like, I also kind of add a little of a curveball to that too, is like, I would be curious what the results would actually be if there wasn't such an incessant propaganda around it as well.
Fair point.
But like, yeah, I think the example I like to tend to give is, you brought the example like, well, what if we said this? I think if we really want to make it really hit hard for our American counterparts and how it feels for the average Canadian here, it's like, what if we turned around and says, we're going to work with China to make you the 26th province of China? Yeah. Like, how would you feel about that? Would actually be a threat. Yeah. Like that's a real threat that could happen. Yeah. That would be frustrating to people. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Marco Perusa. Oops. Rick, what difficulties do you think is happening with the trade deal? Where do you think the red lines are that a deal can't be made? Is it our dairy?
Boy, that's a great question. Well, let's just talk about agriculture for a minute.
Yeah.
All agriculture everywhere in the world is subsidized. The U.S. subsidizes agriculture. Our supply management system is a form of subsidy by controlling the market, which keeps the prices up. But there are subsidies everywhere. And I used to, before he went and started the PPC, I used to have these chats with my former friend. God, I got a lot of former friends, Maxime Bernier. And
you find a lot of people, eh, Rick?
Yeah. I've still got Max's cell phone. Maybe I should call him. But
call him live right now. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
I had this problem because we had the discussions about dairy, and I said, I get it, right? But you don't go in and give something away before negotiating. So if you say you want to get rid of subsidies in Canada as an open free market person. I get that. But if you do that, but nobody else does and continues to subsidize, they all do it in different ways, but they subsidize it in the US, then you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. That's not fair trade. That's one-sided. That's sort of Canadian Boy Scout stuff. So if you want to get rid of some of these things, you got to negotiate and say, great, let's go through the list of your agriculture subsidies, the United States, and let's come to an agreement of how we can lower both of those things, which will lower the prices for everybody. That's how, a discussion should happen. It shouldn't happen as just, well, you guys got to get rid of your subsidies, but in the United States, we'll keep ours. So how are they going? God, the U.S. has trade advisory groups. They've got 1,000 people from businesses that advise the U.S. trade representative in various sectors. So people who work in the actual sectors. We used to have those in Canada. We don't have them anymore. And so when our guys go down to negotiate, they have no industry experts. We have no industry experts that are backing it up. They've put together a little group around some of the auto, but they don't have an ongoing structure where, it's not possible for me as an elected representative to know all the micro details about how every single business organization operates and what the trade barriers are. That's why you need the private sector stuff. So I don't think they're going very well because our guys don't have the background and the expertise. It isn't, a bunch of bureaucrats in the trade. They ain't going to cut it compared to the structure of what the Americans have in place.
So what I understand is they have all these kind of, you said these
sectoral advisory groups,
and we're sending Mr. LeBlanc.
Yeah,
got it.
He has some people from the embassy who are career bureaucrats to help him too.
Okay. Some bonus help. There we go. Holy jumping. Holy smokes. Gee. Well, I don't know if we're going to get through all these. Mr. Perkins, coming from Parachute Pirouettes, what are your thoughts on Alberta trying to leave?
Well, it's a great thing about a democracy. Everybody can have an opinion. I think it's, I don't live in Alberta. I did live in Alberta for about a year and a half. Funny enough, in Matt Jenner's writing. In Matt Jenner's writing, I took over an alcohol retailer over there, speaking of the American who wanted to know something about our booze laws.
Yeah.
But people are free to do what they want. I think it's a reflection that periodically we have these issues where Western Canada feels alienated. And why wouldn't you? If you're in Ontario, and there's people out there in Ontario watching, right? And the federal government basically, not the U.S. government, the federal government did things to shut down the auto business and said, well, we don't like it anymore because you're doing internal combustion engines and we don't want that pollution anymore. So we're going to bring in all these caps on your cars that make production and throw people out of work. I'm not sure Ontario would like that too much, but that's what the last 10 years have felt like under the Liberals for people in Alberta. Their industry, which is the cleanest oil in the world, which, by the way, oil and gas is increasing in need and use around the world, not decreasing. China's increasing their use, not decreasing it. India's increasing their use, not decreasing it. Yeah. That it's better to be from our cleaner, less emission ways of extracting that oil and gas than it is through the unethical oil from other places, let alone the human rights issues. So it's much better for it to be ours. But if the government for 10 years has been trying to basically shut that industry down, a stated objective of former ministers like Wilkinson and Trudeau and Mark Carney before committees and in his book Values is that we shouldn't be in this and we need to replace it with windmills, that somehow that shouldn't be received badly in Alberta.
Yeah.
Like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
So
let's get a brain
I have some sympathy for the fact that people are upset. I think it's impractical because they are surrounded by Canada and the U.S. So if they're landlocked now, I'm not sure that the pipelines that go through BC carrying Alberta oil to the Pacific coast would continue to operate if they weren't part of Canada. So I think there's all kinds of stuff. But I understand the frustration, right? It led to the West wants in the 80s and 90s, the creation of the Reform Party. Back in the 50s, a party called the Progressive Party, a Prairie Populist Party, came about because of the same things. It actually surprisingly ended up merging with the Conservative Party, and the Progressive Conservative Party was not a statement of principle. It was a merger of two parties, a Prairie Populist Party that was eating the lunch on the prairies of the Conservatives. It was headed by a guy named John Bracken. John Bracken became leader of the new merged Progressive Conservative Party and was replaced by Diefenbaker. So, like, the prairies go through this, Quebec goes through this. We had the Progressive Party, we had the Reform Party, we had the Canadian Alliance Party. And these usually result out of the frustration of the West being ignored.
Wow. We love the history lessons from Mr. Rick Perkins here. Tim Hatt says, blessings, Rick. 1, Nova Scotia looks terrible all red.
Yeah, sure does. Believe me, nobody's more upset about that than me.
And then 2, will Bruce Flatt end up in committee, you think?
Bruce Flatt?
I don't know that
Who's
name.
Bruce Flatt?
I don't even know.
I don't know.
Tim Hatt's going to have to follow up on that one.
Tim, send us who Bruce Flatt is.
And do it in the general chat. You don't have
here
to
in Nova Scotia, unfortunately, we had 3 of 11, me, Dr. Ellis, and Chris D'Entremont. I didn't have an NDP candidate, so we ended up where we ended up, and down to 1, and now I'm down to 0, which is not exactly what Nova Scotians voted for, but we'll get back.
Marco Perusa says, Rick, how do I get my nonna to stop voting Liberal?
You're Nona, so I take it you're Italian, and it looks that way.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, the Liberals Party has a long history of support for the in the Italian neighborhoods. You know, when I was growing up, I spent a bit of my life growing up in Toronto in the old Italian neighborhoods there. The Nonas, you know, they came in under immigration, under Liberal government, so they felt a loyalty to them. Yeah. But I got to tell you, there are big Italian neighborhoods around 905 now, and there are, out of the 10 ridings around 905, we won, under Pierre's leadership, 8 of them. We did badly in Brampton, but in the places like Vaughan King, Aurora, all those places with very, very high concentration of Italians, we won those seats. And Anna Roberts, one of our members from up there, is Italian. God, she makes great lasagna. I tell you, one of the things I miss about Ottawa is Anna's lasagna. And so with your Nona, maybe you can get her to move up to Vaughan King Aurora or one of these areas, and or at least spend some time with those Italian communities. And those Italian communities north of Toronto will change your Nona.
Definitely. Well, I mean, my family is actually, I have my nonna came over, immigrated to Pier 21 from Italy, then made her way over to Ontario. And again, my nonno came over with her. Again, that was the conversation. Always vote Liberal. They give me a job. That was always the thing, right? And then that has transitioned. And now we have 3 generations of Italians on my side all voted for Poilievre this past election.
Wow.
So that tells you
there you go.
Now.
So it does happen. That's happened here. You know, we have Halifax is the second largest Lebanese community in the country. And all of the folks that came over from the great entrepreneurs, unbelievable entrepreneurs. Yeah. They've done amazing, wonderful things, from making the donair our official food in Halifax, which I love. I had one 2 nights ago. To commercial real estate and changing our skyline from office towers, and we're now on to the second or third generation, and they're starting to drift away, and because they're looking more for, as they run their businesses, the business-friendly governments who understand that, you know, businesses drive jobs drives prosperity. And governments that put stuff in the way of that hurt our country. Absolutely.
And Rick's on a bit of a schedule here, so we'll try to finish up with a couple more here. We'll go with Vicky Mendonca. Says, Rick, I'm concerned that Carney is playing 2 ends against the middle between China, Carney's $260 million loan, and the U.S., insulting and using TDS on Canadians. Are we bait? I'm worried he's trying to start a war.
I agree with you. I think he's scrambling. I think he had a lot of rhetoric out there in the campaign.
Yeah.
I think he actually thought he was this great negotiator. I still don't know anything that he negotiated in the private sector show, but clearly he can't negotiate with Trump, and now he's sort of scrambling. So is he playing both ends? You know, there is a theory out there that he's trying to tweak Donald Trump's nose by saying, hey, you know, I'm going to play with your enemy. If you don't get nice and your enemy will be up here in Canada. I think that's a very, very dangerous game to play. I think that'll backfire on him. I don't think Trump takes to that kind of thing very well. So are we bait? China's more than willing to play us to get control of our resources. You know, this electronic world requires lithium. We have one producing lithium mine in Canada, and the Trudeau government allowed it to be bought by the Chinese mining company, and it's in Manitoba called the Tanko mine, and all of that lithium goes to China. So China, that's what China likes to do. You know, they can make nice noises, which they're making now in Carney. Oh, we're all respectful. Isn't this great? So that they can come in and buy. Oh, we'll help you develop the Ring of Fire.
Yeah.
We'll help you develop the Ring of Fire. Yeah. No problem whatsoever. As long as we get all the minerals out of that, and then you buy everything back at retail.
Gee.
Right?
Yeah. I didn't even think about that being an issue, but yeah, you're spot on. That's exactly what would happen. Or even the refinery that got purchased by an American company from BC. Like, he's selling everything off.
Like,
so everything that Poilievre's going to do is what he's doing.
It's a very dangerous game to play both sides. Do you think Carney will get a pipeline built? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's all performative. Notice he hasn't put a pipeline on any of his lists.
No.
I mean, Daniel Smith is trying to work with him to try and convince him. She's sort of trying to deal with her own version of Trump, but not as effective. Trump being Carney. Carney's not moving on this. You won't get a pipeline built unless you get rid of the no tanker bill, the one that C-48 that prohibits tankers from coming on the BC coast. There's no point in building another pipeline to the BC coast if you can't bring a tanker in to get the oil out.
For sure.
And so no, unless he gets rid of that bill, there won't be any pipelines built.
Gee, I appreciate your perspective there, Rick. I think we'll just kind of pause it there. As everyone's spamming the chat with Moose Chart, if you haven't heard that already. And all of Mr. Carney's conflicts of interest. David's done a great job on that list.
Yeah.
We'll finish off with, we've had 920 votes and only 30% of people heard of Chris D'Entremont before last week.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm surprised that 30% had him. I don't know how many people would have heard of me before any of being on your show, but it's I'm kind of interested that he's had that kind of profile. But you know, good for him. But 62% or 68% or whatever it was, almost 70% hadn't heard of him.
Yeah.
You know, lots of people can't even name who the prime minister is. So
yeah, that is what it is, folks. I'll let you read that one in your head, and you can decide if you want to listen or read, answer that or not.
Oh, it's Marco with his nana again. All right, not asking. I don't think anything. So Pierre Poilievre's leadership. I got to tell you, I spoke to Pierre for an hour 2 nights ago. Pierre is moving through the process. You know, he's banging on the cylinders that resonate with people who are struggling to pay their bills, and that's still an important issue. He's bringing up, you know, bit by bit the failures of Carney on dealing with the U.S. issue. You know, we didn't instantly under Pierre's leadership overnight have everybody hate the carbon tax. That took a lot of work.
Yeah, it
was day by day, month by month, relentless pursuit of the examples and getting the message out. So I'm confident that Pierre's going to make it through the leadership review process handily. I like Danielle Smith. I've met her and talked to her a couple of times. It's hard to transition from premier to federal leader. The last one we had was Robert Stanfield, and he couldn't win. And I've had discussions with premiers who have thought about it in the past. And because you have to be a really good premier, you have to be so dedicated to defending the interests of your province over everything. That's your responsibility.
Yeah.
That sometimes you can do things that other parts of the country don't like because they don't quite care about your province quite as much.
Right.
You know, people in Nova Scotia not as interested necessarily about Ontario as Ontarians are, although I'm sure they all love the Leafs and the Blue Jays. But and Alberta, you know, it's all different, right? So you've got to do some things as premier that make it tough to become a federal leader because some parts of the country may not like what you did.
Right, for sure. Well, Rick, that was a great episode, man. You always hit it out of the park. We went over 90 minutes this episode.
There you go.
Look at us.
Now you know how I could filibuster for 18 hours.
Dude, I actually do have one question about that was, so obviously filibustering 18 straight hours.
Yeah.
So,
no, it wasn't straight.
Oh, okay.
It was over about 4 meetings. So I think the NHL playoffs were on then. So around midnight, occasionally the chair would cut it off and adjourn or whatever and see what's going on, and then we'd go back at it the next morning. But
wild.
But you can't repeat yourself, so you have to be able to tell some stories, and you have to stick to topic too.
Yeah.
So
dude, that's a skill.
Yeah. So Garnet Genuous, who held the parliamentary record before me, was 12 hours. He tells me I set a parliamentary record on it. And by the way, Chrystia Freeland did eventually come to defend her $500 billion budget before committee, so it worked.
There you go. We had it. Well, folks, that was a great episode. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Rick, for joining the show. It means the world. So whatever you're doing, wherever you are, enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. We love you. We're out.